Welcome to Toffee TV. I'm joined by John Blame. We're going to have a chat about the Everton accounts, which came out last week, and the report. It isn't a business with Blame, which is a exclusive on Premier.
An extra.
That'll be later in the week. But John, the accounts, we've been speaking for weeks and wondering when they were going to drop.
Yeah.
You did say they might leave it to the very last possible day they can, which they did. And they did drop last week. So what did you read into the accounts and the report? Because obviously the headline numbers, almost 45 million lost, even with the sale of Richarlison. Everton have already been referred to an independent commission over profit and sustainability by the Premier League, and these accounts came on top of that. So what, how did you read the numbers from that?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Because you ask me and then you tag on the end. How do you read the numbers from that? I mean, the numbers. Do you see these guys, right? So this is what the accounts look like, right? You get lots of verbiage, pictures and stuff, and then you get something from the chair, something from the chief exec, and then you get into the strategic report, which the FD usually does. So I think Grant's name's on the bottom of this one, right? Yeah, it is. And then you get all the notes that explain the detail and stuff. Yeah. Now, when I look at accounts or annual reports, and accounts, you can really go down one or two ways, can't you? You can be somebody who's really into the analysis of the absolute numbers. How does turnover compare this year to how did it compare last year, and so on, right? But whenever I look at things, because I'm bone idle and I don't want to crawl all over this, right? But I always use like an example about orienteering. Nice. Right, you can have your compass, can't you? Be following it, or you can say I can walk from here to Ped, and then when I get there, I'll take a bearing and then I'll walk. So it's about trends. It's about what's really happening under the numbers. What do the people who run in the business think? Yeah. Okay. So you told me you were going to do this about an hour ago or something, and then I spent half an hour not reading them, because it takes longer than half an hour to read them. Yeah. But half an hour reading the bits I would read. Nice. And that's what these are, people. Just some scribbled notes. Yeah. Right. So I said about the chair, right, which is obviously Bill. So I look at what has the chairperson said. And I'll tell you what I wrote. It's here, right? He's confident. Actually, no, he's not. So straight away, the way he's phrased his report is not, I am confident. He says, the club is confident that we're compliant with all the Premier League's financial rules and regulations. Right? Okay, so that's a key takeaway. Now, that recurs in the chief exec one as well. Nice, yeah. We've all seen that publicised. But we're still in that hinterland of, hang on a minute, because all the good guys, the Esk and the Swiss Ramble and Kieran Maguire and all those sorts of people who look at the absolute numbers will say, here are the numbers in black and white, we broke the rules. But the football club over here is saying, we are confident that we're compliant. And the Premier League have referred us to an independent commission because they don't think we're compliant either. So the trick is to try and understand what's going on around this subject that makes the club think they're compliant and the Premier League think that they're not. And if you look at the numbers, just the black and white numbers, I don't think you get the answer. Okay? And so if you think that we're going to go at some stage to this commission, we'll have some lawyers, they'll have some, and they will be the Premier League. The Premier League will have some lawyers, and you'll have a KC with some advisors on his commission trying to arbitrate and coming up with an objective view. It's going to play out, as legalese things do, around intent, what was reasonable, what wasn't reasonable, and so on, right? So the chair fundamentally goes all straight away with that.
Just to interject there, why do you think the club then are so confident that they've complied? If you've got the Premier League saying you haven't complied and we're referring you to an independent commission, and yet, like you've just said, people who do look at the black and white of this, the numbers of this, turn around and go, there's some holes in Everton's argument here quite clearly, because the numbers state that there is.
Have you ever had a misunderstanding with somebody?
not for 45 million quid. I can assure you that 45 pence maybe.
Well, yeah, well that's right. And when we talk on here, we're trying to make it demystify it, aren't we? We've all said, you know. I mean, the one I have with my missus is, I'll say, well, I'll see you in town, right? And she'll say, yeah, I'll see you at lunchtime. Yeah. Time's that then.
Yeah.
Right? Because lunchtime to her might be 12 o'clock, to me it's 1 o'clock. But we're in agreement, we're going to meet at lunchtime. I turn up at 12 o'clock, there's no sign of her. Or I turn up at 1 o'clock and she's been there an hour. Yeah. So there must be some form of disconnect here between what we think as a football club has happened, right? And what's really happened, and what the Premier League think, and what they really, you know, has really happened. Yeah. Now, the anchor point for this is objectivity, which is the numbers say we broke the rules. End of. Right? But rules, it's a bit like, we all know there are very few laws of the game, right? But they're interpreted, aren't they? So the only conclusion I can draw right now, because we're still lacking insight, is that, and I think we talked about it here last time, what we said was they know something we don't, and we thought the accounts might tell us what that is, and they don't appear to. But they do give some clues, I think. They do give some clues. Now, the clues, I think, are mitigation. Why have we lost money? Yeah. Not just, yes, we've lost money, but why? And that mitigation, I think, becomes it's not our fault, you know? And then you can imagine a very smart lawyer explaining, well, the reasons for profitability and sustainability rules is to make owners, fundamentally, you know, discharged through the executives that they employ to run a decent ship, right? And we want to try and argue, I think, that some of the things are outside of our control.
No, totally.
So then it would be a short leap of faith, wouldn't it, to say, if you take out all the things that were outside our control, we were actually compliant. Now, that's a foundation's been laid down for that, hasn't it? Because that's what we did last year. We sort of blamed COVID, right? And I guess we're going to try and say that the COVID bit is still applying, right? Yes, but the issue is it's subjective. And therefore, hence why Everton will say one thing, Premier League say another thing, and the man in the middle, the KC, he's going to say, well, actually, you know what, on balance, I think they're right, or on balance, I think they're right, you know, and let's wait and see about that. But
are you concerned about a points deduction, or do you not think it'll go that far? Because there's some journalists who are adamant it'll be a points deduction, and it'll be this season.
Well, if this was a legal case in the big bad real world of not being football, journalists wouldn't be able to say that, would they?
No.
You know, this guy's up in court for this. We think he should get life.
Yeah.
You know, life meaning life, not 42 years, life, you know, type of thing. And they get into trouble. So some of them need to rein it in a little bit, right? Because some of those journalists are being influenced by people with skin in the game. You know, I wonder who's got skin in the game. Oh, everybody from Crystal Palace downwards has got skin in the game. And, you know, and journalists are choosing to report. And our mate Matt, you know, he's reporting.
Use the term journalist lightly.
Yeah. He's reporting, if you will, that they're all angry. They want it done straight away, and they want them punished heavily.
Of course they do.
Yeah, and yet the root of that is some football clubs being angry with the Premier League, isn't it? But they're not reporting it that way.
No.
How come these guys were squeaky clean last year and now they're not? Yeah. Okay. We all want to know the answer to that question.
Of course we do, yeah.
Right? So the chair, he homes in on, we're compliant. The only other things he really talks about are, you know, the turnover is what it is, despite the suspension of the relationship with USM. I don't know if people have been picking up on that particularly, the word suspension.
I was going to say,
you know,
suspension.
Because suspension implies it's there and it can start again later. You know, suspensions end, don't they?
Of course they do.
And I don't think they're talking about sanctions being the suspension. It's the suspension of the relationship. Yeah. So the implication is, you know, certainly from the chair's perspective, and I think the chief exec says something similar, that if and when sanctions are lifted, we'll be getting money from this man again or his businesses again. And I thought, notwithstanding, and perhaps we don't need to talk about Bill's bit of a romanticism about how 2 great games last season and all that sort of stuff. But trying to read between the lines, reading the room, right? To use the phrase, as I think he did in his report, about how Kevin Thelwell has quietly and effectively made changes, yeah? The quietly bit, we don't want him to be that quiet.
No.
We want to hear what's happening and what he's doing.
Of course, and why he's doing it, yeah.
So I take some themes there which are laying foundations for how we're going to defend ourselves. Because if you're truly objective, you could easily choose to say, well, the chair is being delusional to say we're fully compliant with the regulations, when clearly we're not.
Yeah.
So they know something we don't.
Yeah. Because
rest assured, Bill can wax the lyrical about how great it was Leicester away. And I was there, it was, the release, when DCL heads the ball in and then you're waiting, whatever it was, 10 minutes to see whether that actually makes a difference, was also building memories, right? But 2 games a season does not make, But that romanticism and stuff won't have been influenced by lawyers. But you'd like to think that him saying
fully compliant will be
is influenced by lawyers. So it's about interpretations, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. Long waffle. I can't imagine that these guys are going to wait until the last 2-3 games of a season and then apply such a punitive penalty for the first time ever on a Premier League football club. Because the proverbial would hit the air conditioning system then.
Oh, without a shit. Listen, that opens up everything then. It opens up a world of pain for the Premier League and fans getting involved and class actions and all sorts of stuff that's been mentioned and corruption thrown out and everything. It's just something the Premier League want.
They don't need it, timing and so on. So
I think if it was a points deduction, it would apply to the next season anyway. I think if Everton were to be given it, and I don't think they will be, but if they did, start the season -3.
Yeah, but I think if you look about what's reasonable, and this is where the mitigation and the arguments that are going to be put before the KC is, and again we did talk about it last week. If I'm trying to represent Everton, I'm looking at you as the judge, and I'm saying, mate, what are these rules for? That to stop people getting in a mess in the first place, and if they do get in a mess, help them out of it by applying restrictions, cost controls, oversight, all those sorts of things. This is working as designed. These guys, huge losses, but their most recent accounts show they're listening. The patient is responding to treatment.
Yeah.
When the next year falls off and this year gets added on, and you might want to talk about that later,
we will,
then it all goes in the right direction. So if you want to send a signal, then should the first guy who does something wrong get the biggest punishment that anyone's ever going to get? Or is it just got to be something that both keeps that guy in line? In other words, we don't go, let's spend like crazy again. And others can see what happens if you cross the line. Now, I think, and I don't suppose anyone can dissuade us from this, I think last year we've had that, we're looking at you, oversight. We've looked at you and you've still breached. There's a Premier League argument. We're going to argue against it. So what's the next level of punishment? The next level of punishment we would think, which is perverse, is a financial one, i.e. a fine, and or say a restriction on transfers, which is where a lot of the money goes on transfer fees, agents, and so on, wages, right? And then you're into the penalties around sporting sanctions, aren't you, around points deductions, those sorts of things. But I meant to say this when we were talking about it last week. Each and every one of those, in fact, you could hit us with all of them, but suspend them.
Well, he would.
Which is what the Football League do.
They've just done it with Reading.
And Reading, people have not really got it, that's a suspended fine.
That they breached.
Punishment, which they breached, therefore it just happens. And so if I'm, the Premier League, I almost want to say to the guys I'm going to make an example of, 6 points suspended, 10 points suspended. or 3 now. You know what I mean? Because I think most fans, hopefully, notwithstanding the challenges we've got, if we started next season at -3 and that was the end of it, we'd probably think that was not too bad, wouldn't we?
We would, yeah, of course.
So,
but we should have a fine as well.
I think so. So I just, again, can't see it this season, no matter how much Matt keeps trying to rebel rouse.
He's trying to do it for 4 years.
Yeah.
He's got Everton have obviously, and Evertonians took his missus or something. Something's happened because he has got a proper cop on with Everton.
Yeah, he gets a battering as well.
He needs to get out and get a life. Really.
So you get all that waffle just out of what the chair says in 2 or 3 things, and then the chief exec says similar things.
Yeah.
And starts reaffirming the mitigation, which is actually, it's the inability because of things like COVID and changing circumstances like Ukraine and all that sort of stuff, that's mitigated our ability to make the large profits on player trading like we have in the past. Again, you can see the argument being, if these things outside of our control, acts of God, force majeure, all those techie phrases, hadn't happened, we'd have done these things and we'd have been fine. And the argument, of course, must be, if we make decisions like buying players, improving people's contracts and so on a reasonable assumption that we're going to sell a player or that player in that transfer window, and then because of COVID,
whatever,
a worldwide pandemic, a war or whatever, we can't. Are you really going to take a baseball bat to us? We're not psychic. We can't look into the future. You know, if everyone in this division was prudent, in other words, they didn't know what they didn't know, therefore they were very cautious, you wouldn't have every single Premier League club that's reported results making losses.
No.
Yeah.
Chelsea.
So there's a, you know, I just think if you were playing poker, then it's not clear that the Premier League's got the best hand.
Back on to the numbers then. I mean, what kind of drivers do you look at in these, you know, when you're looking at Everton's accounts? Because obviously, seeing it spun in one way, and there's always 2 sides to everything, but seeing it spun in one way as, well, 44.7 million losses, well, that's better than 100 million losses, so therefore we're doing all right. But obviously within that, we were forced to sell our record goal scorer, which without selling him would have been over 100 million losses. Now you could argue, well, a lot of football clubs work like that. They sell players and they reduce the loss. That's how you do it, to keep going. You buy, you build it up, you sell, you buy. Brighton and Brentford they're not operating the way we are, but we're always lauding the fact that they bring players in, develop them, sell them on, and that goes back into the books, and we go again. So how do you look at that? Do you look at the overlying number and go, well, Richarlison being sold is part of, let's say, was part of the strategy for this season?
Yeah.
So it was 100 million, it's down to 60 because it's down to 40 because we've sold them to 60. That's part of the strategy for this season. And we do it again next season with Onana. Say you buy him for 30, sell him for 70, then there's another 40 million profit. That's how we're going about it. Is that a fair way to look at it?
I think it is in some respects. If anybody looks back at through the Mashiri years, notwithstanding you've got a sugar daddy who gives you big piles of money, and I think, you know, less than prudent discipline has been applied to how that money has been spent, right? Then you would look at the football club, and there are limited drivers, you use the phrase drivers, there are limited drivers of where our money comes from. And we know where it comes from. It comes from broadcast. We can talk about that if you like in a minute. It comes from match day income, and it comes from commercial income, right? And the last one being player trading. And if you look at while we're at Goodison Park, we've got an artificially low ceiling on match day income. There's not much we can do around put the prices up to crazy levels. So forget that one. Commercial performance, great opportunity, really low base. What
do you mean by a low base? Because people will say, what do you mean, John, low base for commercial opportunity?
We have always been poor on our commercial income, right? In the sense of how much money do we get in sponsorship and those sorts of things. And a number of years ago, it was perhaps 20 million or something, 15 million even.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the club are fond, and it's funny, I find it quite amusing, actually, because some of the sound bites that were used to explain poor performance in the accounts, which I always assume were invented by Robert Elston, are still being used.
Nice.
So if you look at the report, it talks about 12% compound growth in the commercial performance over the last 10 years. Now, that's a bit like saying, if you've got 12% compound growth on your money over the last 10 years, you'd be really quite happy.
Yeah.
Right? If Manchester United grew by that, because they've got such a high base, they'd be very happy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a bit of smoke and mirrors. It's a bit of trying to project things better than they really are, because fundamentally our commercial income is really low for the status we have, you know, as a football club, from where we claim we want to be. You would expect Farhad Moshiri to walk through the door and say, that number needs to be a lot bigger, a hell of a lot bigger, you know, and it isn't. And you don't get any prizes for saying, oh, well, we've looked at it, and over the last 10 years, you know, it's grown by 12% year on year. But that's because 4, 5, 6 years ago, we had big spikes. If you look at the last 3 years, it's nowhere near that. Yeah. So commercial performance is really poor.
Right.
So over the years, we've relied upon pretty much the only thing that's left. Broadcasters outside our control, match day income we can't do because of the stadium and stuff. Commercial income, I'm sorry, it's just not good enough. Right?
How do we grow that though, John? Or what do you say to people, or people at the football club, if they were sat here and they were like, well, John, we don't win anything, we don't play in Europe, we don't finish high up the league, we're in the same city as one of the biggest clubs in the world, so therefore we just can't sell anymore. We can't.
So you're the sales guy.
Yeah, I'm the person giving. Yeah. You're asking questions, and I'm just giving you the. I don't believe all of these, by the way. I'm just giving you things that people would say, or I've heard people say. So, what would you say to those, Mark? Because I've heard the last one particularly. Everton won't get bought because they're in the same city as Liverpool. The biggest load of nonsense I've ever heard in my life. But what about the other things? You know, we share a city with them. We never win anything. We don't even finish near the top of the league. I'm never in Europe. Okay, so we can't sell anymore.
So there's a lot of things to unravel in that, right? So the first things first.
Unravel away, John. Yeah. Unravel away.
You know, they've been closer to administration in the past than we are right now.
Yeah.
You know,
true. Yeah.
You know, and the caution in the director's report, and then subsequently commented upon by the auditors around, you could be in real difficult place if you're relegated. You may actually not be able to be a sustainable business, right? I.e., you go out of business, therefore you go into administration. Yeah. They've been far closer to that than we are right now.
40 minutes.
And we're really close. You know, like the old, Armageddon clock. They were at 23:59, and it's only 10 to 12 for us at the moment.
Okay. You know? Well, I want to come on to that, so come back to that.
But anyway, what I would say is, if you have the right people with the right mindset, and that comes from leadership, whoever, let's call them sales director, just because we haven't got one called that, so we're not fingering an individual. The sales director's job is to do stuff and sell stuff, you know, and I've done that job in the past. Yeah. And I've worked for a company which had 0 brand, 0 customers, right? Nothing, no references, no credentials, no nothing other than a guy who was the executive chair who had a good idea that says, if we package this right, we can sell it right, and we can win a client, and then use that to make ourselves better, and then build on it, then, you know, we can make a business out of this. Yeah. And 3 years after I joined, we were number 1 in the marketplace. Yeah. From never heard of you to number 1. Yeah. Now, football, apparently, I'm told all the time, is different. Yeah. Okay. And of course, commercial sponsorship and all those sorts of things, they're far easier if you can say, and come and see the European champions, come and see the World Club champions, come and see the Premier League. Yeah, that's all true. Yeah. But Liverpool Football Club have increased their commercial turnover in their last accounts, give or take, by the value of what ours is annually. It's gone up in 1 year by what we do annually.
Yeah.
Don't hassle me that it's not exactly true what I just said. We're talking about trends, big picture. You know, their commercial turnover is 8 to 10 times the size of ours. Now, I don't think ours should be 8 to 10 times bigger.
Yeah.
Just like I suspect their owners don't expect theirs to be comparable to Manchester United's. Okay, but we should be a lot closer.
Yeah.
So I said to you when we're making a coffee, right? You do it, guys. While you're listening, you do it. Do you think Everton's commercial performance, knowing what you know about us as a football club, knowing what the atmosphere was like in that game the other night, knowing how you could market that and so on and so forth, 70-odd Americans have gone home to tell everyone they see how incredible Goodison Park is, blah, blah, blah. In other words, if you could bottle it and sell it, yeah? Do you think that our commercial performance, i.e. our income, should be, and you only got a choice really, 10% of Liverpool's or 20% of Liverpool's? Because that's all we're asking. Because if we did that, we'd double.
I think it should be. I think 20% of Liverpool's isn't a massive ask.
So if I'm the chief exec or I'm the chair, I'm turning to the sales director and I'm saying, I want you to go and get me all these deals, right? I don't know where they are. It's your job. And I'll help you, right? I'll help you sell, because companies sell, not necessarily just individuals. But I want to get to a place whereby if we're not in Europe, we're not winning cups, we're not Premier Leagues, with this percentage on average of the clubs who are. Right? And by the same token, let's measure ourselves against the clubs who are not. Yeah?
Yeah.
You know, and you're often, you know, repeating the fact that Brentford and Brighton and those sorts of clubs do what they do better than us, right? And maybe we should have a look. Maybe I should. It's not my gig crawling through numbers, but I can happily do it if people are interested and say, well, what's the commercial performance of all these other football clubs? Because I'm sitting here going, well, if we, I think I'm with you, 20% of Liverpool's. Sounds horrible. People will hate it. Well, do we want to measure ourselves against them? Well, they're amongst the best at it. So, yeah, always measure yourself against the best. But what's ours compared to a teeny-weeny little club like Bournemouth, a teeny-weeny little club like Brighton, a teeny-weeny little club like Brentford? I mean, are they a bigger percentage of ours than we are of Liverpool? You see what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, it's great, and you can trip it out and saying all this huge, sexy growth. But the bottom line is our commercial performance number is awful. Therefore, it puts pressure on the player trading. Yeah. And then when things totally out of your control turn up, one after the other, COVID,
of course,
and the Ukraine, then you can't realise what's been keeping your head above water, really. You know, and if you do look at the years of how much we've made, then we're realistically, you've just said it, we made, what was it, 60 odd, 67 or something? Player trading profit, that's Richarlison, right? Yeah. And then the year before that, what was it, 40-ish or something? The year before that, what was it? I don't know.
Well, the last big one we had was 2018.
Okay, I've written it down here. So 2022, 68 million. Yeah. 21, 13. Yeah. Don't forget there's negatives against this and stuff.
Of course, yeah.
2020, 40, 2019, 20, and then 2018, nearly 90. Yeah. And that's Lukaku, Barkley, Cleverley, Deulofeu. But the crap we bought with that money, you know what I mean, is beyond belief. But it is what it is, right? So when I'm doing this, like literally, this is extracted from half an hour reading that, scribbling some notes. You start to see that what the club are saying in their annual report is it's not our fault. Yeah. That's what I read. I appreciate both the chair and the chief exec need to put a positive spin on, because lest we forget, people, we're reading it as Everton fans. The Premier League and maybe even the KC and others are reading it as impartials. Yeah. And you've got to try and influence people. Yeah. But the reality is, it's just not good enough.
I mean, you mentioned.
Not good enough.
No. You mentioned before the Armageddon type thing, you know, or it might be in the auditor's report, you know, saying we wonder whether this business, if they're relegated, whether they can keep going. And you've just said it is getting that way. I mean, that'll be terrifying to most Evertonians.
Of course it would.
Because we're right in the middle of a relegation battle. And if we get relegated, the football club could end up in administration, and that'd be it. I think that's a stretch, personally.
What, going into administration?
Yeah, but that's just me. I'm just saying that seems mad to me. But is it not that mad, what you're saying? Am I wrong? Am I totally wrong? I probably am.
Yeah. Again, and talking about, if people want to try and understand some of this stuff, like I said, you can all look at the numbers, and there's loads of good bloggers out there who can explain the actual numbers themselves. But you don't have to read much of the annual report to get some of the answers to some of your questions, right? Because whilst I say, commercial performance, all that sort of stuff, just not good enough, then you won't find it written in there, right? The fact that they think it's not their fault. No one's going to, chief exec's not going to go, oh, by the way, all this is my fault. It's happened on my watch. Or the chair, this happened on my watch. It's the fault of COVID. It's the fault of the Ukraine. It's the fault of our inability, therefore, to sell the players we presumably would have sold.
There's less money and
so on. So if you're trying to be impartial, you say, well, okay, they're all true. So what's happening on the other side of the equation? If you're affecting cost control, are you only spending money where you have to? Are you cutting your, pulling your belt in, all that sort of stuff? And clearly there's signs in the accounts with increasing numbers in certain parts of the business and so on, that either as just to use that phrase for a bit of sport, as a going concern, we think we need lots more marketing and media people, but less in the academy, and we need more management people, but less who are looking after security and safety and maintenance and stuff like that. Now, we talked about this a year ago, right? A year ago, we sat here. It's probably out there, isn't it? Because none of it disappears, does it? And I think I said something like, if you look at the staff numbers, then it seems like the numbers are growing in the places where they shouldn't. And I would be brutal and say, in the overhead areas, and whether you like individuals or not, it's hard to see what the increase in marketing staff, for example, last year has realised. Because, but I think the club might argue, well, because we're trying to be balanced here. Our commercial revenue has pretty much stood still, but USM's gone away, so we must have filled the gap. You see what I mean? And the way we've filled the gap is lots of little things, and if you oversimplify it, if you were getting, and make it up, the exact numbers of being the accounts, if we were getting, say, 10 million from one sponsor, and that sponsor went away, and we replaced it with 10 £1 million contracts with 10 different sponsors, that takes a lot more resource.
Of course,
You know what I mean? So you can be critical, and I'm doing it. And I can do the broad brush stuff as, don't increase your overhead. Right? You're going to end up in court soon, and some of your mitigation could have been, every cost we could cut, we've cut. And someone will say, but you've increased this, and it might not be hugely material. You know what I mean? We might have, if it's not playing staff or management staff, then the numbers aren't going to be huge, even if it's lots of people. But if our costs have gone up in overhead terms, for roles that one might say, I don't see the value, say by £3 million, that wipes out your increase in commercial. And so on, and look after the pennies and the pounds, look after the and all those sorts of things. So there's ups and downs and negatives and positives, and if you look at it from a half full point of view, you can have one view. If you look at it from a half empty point of view, you can have a different view. And we're chatting now, because we're not having to go forensically at it, a bit balanced, But I think all the club's views on this are all sunny day plans and half full. And I just think there's a general theme in there that all this is outside our control. And I think an impartial observer may say that some of it, well, absolutely it is, but you could have done better, couldn't you? You could have.
Well, we could.
You could have cut costs. You could have sold more players. right? And going back to your observation about getting close to administration, getting relegated and so on.
Yeah.
One of the things that really irritated me was how freely it became known we have to sell players. You know, selling is really difficult. I know there's lots of people out there who think salesmen do bugger all, but selling is really, really difficult. And if you're trying to sell a player when the buyer knows full well by a certain date you have to sell somebody, you're not going to get the best deal. You're not going to get the best deal. And, you know, whoever sold Richarlison in the circumstances did a good deal because they didn't have a good hand to play with, did they? You know, where we may get tripped up by Premier League and the Independent Commission is you needed to sell Richarlison and somebody else or more players to the tune of clearly how much we're over the limit.
Yeah.
You know, and we're over the limit by 50 or 60 million quid. So, and that's where we'll get into the depths of, if we've agreed as a football club to generate a certain amount of profit from player trading and we haven't delivered it, that might be the thing that gets us. Scary.
No, it is, and obviously we'd have to deal with that, won't we? And accordingly, and it would be a fire sale, I imagine, if you go down, because you've got to get players off the books.
You see, fire sale is a really scary phrase because clearly its connotations from days gone by as you're talking about assets which are damaged.
Yeah.
And therefore, you just take anything you can get for them. But everybody's, and this is where the club's lack of communication generally, they're not pre-positioning the fans, they're not pre-positioning the media, or they don't appear to be. You know, you may be trying, guys, but it's not evident, right?
No.
And therefore, it's becoming a free hit time. Like you're talking about before about the media, journalists manipulating what's going on to say, Everton are horrible. We all know they've been breaking the rules. They need to be dealt with harshly, and it needs to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, and every single time these media outlets quote the losses, they quote 400 million or high 300
million.
They're not the numbers that count, right? And why isn't the club telling them over and over and over again, right? Every single time Sky's presenter says, I never lost this, right? And therefore they've breached the rules, they need to be reminded those numbers are wrong that you're using. And eventually you have to call them out and say, we are fed up to the back teeth of Sky Sports falsely reporting this. Of course not, right? Because it's dead easy if you're uncomfortable with communicating when you get given a reason not to communicate. You know, the first thing Bill says is, I'm not allowed to discuss it. And he's probably right, but you could have been discussing it for the last 5 years, right? And that's what City do really well.
Yeah.
You know how they come out the blocks and...
it is mad because they're facing over 100 charges, apparently. No one's going on about City. City's not... If you're facing over 100 odd charges, I haven't seen a thing every single day going when Man City get charged for that and when Man City get charged for that. There's been the stories, of course, there has, but it's not every day. Everton, there's every other day. There's 6 points, the 6 points they're going to get taken off them. Relegation, if they get relegated, it's Armageddon. If this happens, and it's one charge Everton are facing. And Everton haven't been, like you said, Everton haven't come out. I mean, they've turned around and said, we feel we're compliant, it's in the report. They've said it, they've released a statement, we won't be commenting again.
Which is right.
But like you say, they could be speaking to people and saying, them numbers you keep quoting are wrong, whatever. It's not just on Everton, but that's the way it is, because people will... Everton is a big story, Everton are a big club, they've been run poorly, the key accounts show you this. But Everton are quoting mitigating circumstances. One thing I wanted to ask you, how current is this report and accounts? Because sometimes you can set this 6 months ago and things are totally different 6 months later.
Yeah, clearly, good question, because things always happen after the books have closed, and so you tend to get notes and stuff like that. And one of the things that we were critical, or I was anyway, is that the chief executive always says you get these accounts as soon as they're ready. And a good marker for them being ready, not the report, the actual accounts,
just the accounts,
is they're signed off by the auditors. You know, so when we shareholders and everyone else got the accounts last year, which was March time or whenever it was, it was like months upon months upon months. You know, like, I think October they were signed off by the auditors. Yeah, these were signed off on the 28th of February.
Okay.
Which is the day before they have to go to the Premier League. You know, so clearly there's stuff going on, and it's right that the club wants the accounts and the books, if you like, to look as good as they can. And clearly they left it to the last possible minute for that reason. So what we're talking about is just that, current.
Okay.
You know,
because again,
passage of time, it doesn't make a huge difference because it's last June that the year ended. But even so, they are as current as can be.
Okay. Because people will look into what's been going on as well, you know, and turn around and say, well, if you're looking at it, there's been, if you were trying to convince the Premier League that things are getting better, you'd look and go, well, we made a loss of this much last year. We've cut it to, because that was one of the things that was said, it's cut down now to 45 million, the losses. If you're doing the profit and sustainability window of the 3 years, then we talked about it before, 90 million drops off that for the next season.
That's right,
and therefore will almost give you a not a positive, but it's a big reducer again, isn't it? It's a reducer of where we would be in that, because obviously profit and sustainability is taken over a 3-year period. So you could suggest, if you really wanted to, that Everton are getting better and better, and the passage of time, which is something you have always said over the passage of time, it will start to right itself, because we're seeing a lot of players dropping off the books who've been on big contracts. Quite a lot of them have walked out the door for nothing, but we're coming to, we'll do another one in the summer with Yeremina, won't we, when that ends? Dropping off. And because realistically, Everton haven't spent any kind of money properly, just on its own, since Carlo Ancelotti, the end of the fit. So it was 20, wasn't it? Summer 20. We spent 60 million quid. And we only recouped a little bit. Since then, everything has been trading off against the other. Benitez come in, it was 1.5. Nothing was spent in the January. Branthwaite came in for $1 million, that was it. The Benitez came in, we spent 1.5 million. Then we bought 2 fullbacks, but we sold one for the same amount or a bit more. So that was naught almost. If you, in very basic terms, that was naught. Last summer we sold Richarlison, and then we bought players in for roughly the same amount of money, you know, give or take. But we've got money going out again. You know, Anthony Gordon's gone out. So Everton for the last few years have done what you would want a football club to do if you were the Premier League, to go, well, oh yeah. So up until this point, you were spending like money didn't matter. And I still look at that and listen to the way Carlo Ancelotti spoke. I remember you talking about Sasha Ryantsev. And it was big talk around the time, and obviously COVID has slightly changed it, but there was talk around the time that profit and sustainability was about to change anyway. City had challenged it. There was talk the rules were going to change. Carlo Ancelotti mentioned it on a few occasions. We're not worried about that. We're still spending money because the rules are going to change. And I just wondered if Everton got caught up in that belief as well, that we'll just keep doing it at that time until the rules change. And then the rules hadn't changed, and all of a sudden someone went to Rafa Benitez, actually they're not changing for now, we need to get on board. And since they've kind of got on board, Everton have almost done things the correct way. So that would be my argument with the Premier League as well, would be, look, we've realised there was a big issue and we have started to try to correct it, so we're going in the right direction. It might be a very loose argument, it might be a very, very weak argument to give the Premier League.
The way I would, and it's interesting because I don't think this commission should be particularly interested in how it's been done, just what the outcome is. I think
I just mean the trends.
No, I understand. Like no, you're right. No, you're spot on. Well, you are spot on, because clearly, if we have a £90 million, the year that's going to drop off when this financial year comes into play for profitability and sustainability, then the high watermark was 120-ish million or whatever. Then you take the things off that you're allowed to take off. And so we're left with a minus 90. Now that minus 90 will disappear. Now you could argue if we're currently, give or take, 60-ish above where we're allowed to be. You were 165 instead of 105. Then clearly if you knock 90 off,
but all of a sudden
then you come into line, don't you? And this is also a financial year where Anthony Gordon will show, Moise Keane will show, and you go, whoa, party on, dudes! You know, we're going to be way. But some of the where you were dancing, right, was around we're making better decisions, we're going in the right direction. Some of that stuff has happened just because it's happened. Right? You know, clearly, if you make a huge loss and it's every 3 years, you know, the worst case scenario in 3 years is falling off. It's better, right? So that's how we can see it coming down the track.
I wasn't saying this was well planned by
no, of course. I'm just saying, but the trick, of course, is to know these things are going to happen and then choose to make your decisions based upon it. Now, I shouted a throwaway at you before that what often businesses will say is that there's some one-offs which are messing about with our numbers. Now, clearly, quite recently, a one-off made our numbers look a lot better than they really were because Mr. Usmanov's company paid 30 million quid to be first in line. And that made our commercial look great. For 1 year only. But other things which are typically one-offs that happen, hopefully not too frequently, are the huge sums of money you have to spend when you sack managers. But we've made that an annual event. So we know in these accounts how much Rafa Benitez cost us, which is around 10 or 11 million quid. So straight away, we've lost 44.7. Circa 25% of that is just getting rid of him and his team. And now this year's accounts are going to be getting rid of Frank Lampard and his team. See what I mean? So you've got to stop shooting yourself in the foot. Now that doesn't say keep your manager who's not performing. Because but you do get to the point where you've got very little wriggle room. You know, very little wriggle room at all. But yes, things are getting better because they could only get better. And of course, what's emerging over the horizon is the stadium, which will bring increased match day income. I mean, even if the ticket prices were all the same, they clearly won't be. Then we will get more money because the capacity is bigger, right? So yes, you can easily see how there is a glint at the end of that tunnel. But you've got to stop doing I mean, in footballing terms or sporting terms, we need to stop doing the unforced errors. And try and chip away at all the other stuff.
We've got to anyway, haven't we? Even if we move away from, if we're just moving away from the reporting around the books and you're just looking at it as a business in the whole, and you're looking at it as with your full glass half full, Everton can get back to being a competitive club near the top end of the league again. We want to get into Europe and everything that comes with it. You know, ideally we want to try and get in the Champions League at some stage in this new stadium. To get anywhere near any of that, got to start doing things better anyway. We've got to improve our commercial revenue big time. We've got to, the ticket prices will go up, but even if they're just nudged up a little bit, like you just said, that we will go up. But I'm just saying, even if they did just go up a bit, that will create more revenue by the thing. We've got to buy low and sell high with our players, which boost the revenue up, but have a stream of players coming through where you can mould the team. Don't pay players crazy wages and then get nothing back on them. All of those things anyway need to be being done for you to move in the right direction, the way you want to go anyway. And this is the stuff that we're needing to do now to improve the way the football club is run. But if the football club's going to be run any better and it's going to actually act like a football club and try to actually win football matches and compete for trophies at some stage, whether that be a Carabao Cup or an FA Cup or get into the Conference League in Europe and win it, whatever, you've got to start doing all of this stuff anyway. much better than what Everton Football Club have been doing it.
Of course.
Because it's not difficult to look, at some people's careers. Michael Keane was mentioned before on something. When you look at his career basically symbolises what's gone on at Everton Football Club. Up and downs, lots of different managers, as he progressed the way he could have done. And I can name 5 or 6 players within that period of time. I'm using Michael Keane because he's here he's here 1 year after Moshiri's been here.
Sure.
And he's still here now. Jordan Pickford's another one.
Yeah.
But Keane suffered from many different managers, like the football club has.
They're the only 2 survived, if you like, from
the big spend in 2017. If you're looking at the amount of managers that we've had and sacked in that time, we must have spent 70, 80, 90 million pound in that time sacking managers.
Crazy.
We've got to have done. We've had about 8.
Well, we're talking about these accounts and how we've lost 40 million, and I said, well, 10, 11 of that fundamentally is for Rafa Benitez and his team. But we're also in litigation with somebody to the tune of 10 million quid. So you could argue that half those losses could have been avoided. Yeah. Now, clearly, I don't know, they're obviously not going to tell us, but the implication is that it's Koeman or something, and that scam where he was the Dutch manager and we were paying his wages and all those sorts of things, maybe something like that's gone to litigation. But we've said in the accounts we're quite confident that we'll get 10 million quid out of it. That'll make a big difference. There's another plus 10 million quid. When we get into Bramley Moor, the Everton Stadium on the banks of the Royal Blue Mersey, then there's going to be concerts there. They'll generate income. Try make use of that stadium on non-match days, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So you can easily paint a picture of potential upside. Yeah. Because, when we talked about, are we at the bottom yet? Well, we won't know till we get past that commission, will we? No. Right? It's always darkest before and all that sort of stuff. But when people say that this football club is not saleable and that Farhad Moshiri is asking too much for it, then they're not wrong, but they're not right either. Because there's countless businesses who get bought and sold on goodwill. Goodwill being, it's not in the numbers. Yeah. And it's about potential, and so on, right? So I'm sure that your MSPs of this world or whoever else comes along can see future value in this business. Yeah. And just like the fire sale you talked about with players and so on, there's also a danger, in quotes, that a fire sale of the business itself or a portion of the business could mean some opportunists gets hold of it. Yeah. And that's why perhaps Farhad Moshiri wants to keep a controlling interest. And that's why he's trying to sell minority interests, because he wants to get out the other side and then realise some upside for himself, I suspect. Yeah.
Right, let's leave it there then. I think we've covered most of it without going directly.
And you can do this, just read the first 10 pages or whatever it is.
Yeah, you can read it. Come up with, let us know what you think in the comments section below. What are you feeling about the accounts? Is it getting better? The numbers would suggest it's getting better. Whether that's the way Everton have to do things, selling players. But it does look like they are moving in the right direction. Maybe, I don't know.
6 pages.
I don't know. But do it. Let us know what you think. Big thanks to John. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and if you want to join Toffee TV Premier, the link is in the description and the QR code will be on the screen in a sec. Thanks for watching. See you later.
Bye bye.